Hello guys, in today's video we'll be looking at a basic BFS visualizer. So if you're familiar with data structures and algorithms, BFS means breadth first search. So simply put, how it works is, let's say for example, the way this one is set up, for example, you're starting at A and you are looking for H. It's going to check all the last nodes before moving to the next level. So it's going to check everything here, check everything here, and check everything here before getting to H, and it stops at H, which is what we're looking for. So in this example, we'll be using React, Redux, and ReactFlow for these plots you're looking at. So basically what we're trying to build is going to work like this. You have a flow chart with different nodes, and you set it up to start somewhere which is A. Obviously it always starts at A, and then to stop anywhere it's in any node it's looking for. So if you, in this example, you have A to H, so if I click the next, it starts from A and it counts the number of steps that is taken, and then next again it goes to B, next, and we keep going until it reaches H. So when it reaches H, it tells you found H in 16 steps. So at that point, you can't move anymore, but then you can reset and it goes back to the beginning, and you can also go around again. It's the same thing. So for this breadth first search algorithm, we'll be using a generator function, which will allow us to pause and play the implementation. So it's going to move to one node and then stop, and then we click next. It triggers the generator function again for the next value, so it moves to the next node and it stops. So every time we move to different nodes, we're simply invoking the generator's next value. So to start this one, we'll create a new project. So in this case, I'll create a new project. I'll call it, so if you're familiar with React, you can use create React app or any other setup that you like to use to bootstrap your React app. So I'm going to call this BFS visualizer. So you can simply say npx create React app BFS visualizer. So, and then hit enter. So that takes a few seconds to complete. So after the app has been created, I'm going to move into the file, and then I'm going to open it up inside of my editor. I'll be using VS Code. So you can use any editor you want to use. So enter. So after opening up, we want to set up the file structure the way we would want our files to be stored in the app. So in the source, I'm going to start by creating a folder for components, and another folder for Redux, and one more folder for utils. Yeah. So first we would like to have our breadth first search components, so bfs.jsx. We also like to have our flowchart components, and also we want to have some files and folders here also. But before we add those files, let's run our installations, so we can do that while the installation is running. So for this project we need a few packages, so I'll just use yarn add and list all the packages we need. So we need Redux, we need React Redux, we need ReduxFlow for the flowchart, we need reselect for Redux also. So if you're not familiar with any of these packages, you can Google them and check out their documentation. So I know a lot of people will not be familiar with ReactFlow, but it's simply a flow charting tool for React. So it allows you to create different kinds of flowcharts for React. It has a lots of customization options. So depending on what your need is, okay, it's loading. So, and there are lots of examples also. So this is an example. Yeah, so you can check out their documentation and get familiar if you would like to use the tool. So these are all the tools we will need. So I'll start the installation and then we'll go back to the file structures. So for this component, we need a folder here for our charts. For our charts data files. So maybe I can just put that in utils. Yeah. And then in here we need our BFS algorithm. So let's say algos. Add BFS. Okay, so let's leave this for now. So in the BFS, let's just create an empty component that simply says BFS, and for the flowchart, let's create another empty component that simply says flowchart. So in the BFS, we want to have the flowchart inside of it. So basically, and in the app.js, we want to have, so you can go ahead and throw away all of this. And we just want to have our BFS. So that's the only thing in the app. I'll make the logo. So, okay. Redux flow not found. So I think I messed up the spelling for Redux, it's ReactFlow, not Redux flow. So I'll just run that again. Mistake. Yeah. Okay. So basically we have a React app that will show us our breakfast search component. So let's start with the Redux setup right after the file structures. So inside of Redux, we want a folder for reducer, and we also want some files. So we want our types.js here. So this is where we'll declare all our Redux types. Yeah. And then we also want to have our store here. So we just need our types and our store. So we can start with the reducer setup first. So I have an index.js here, and I'll also have our main reducer, which I will call traverse.js. So it simply holds all the information about our journey through the tree that we are traveling through. So in here, we want to get all the types first, but we don't have any types. So we go back to our types and we add some types. So one type we want to have is the next type. So this type simply says move to the next node. So, and it's going to contain next. And then the next one we want to have is our reset. So this one says start all over again, and everything gets reinitialized. So we only need two types here, the next and the reset. So go back to your reducer, and in traverse you need an initial state, and this initial state is going to have a few keys. It's going to have the visited, which will be all the nodes you have visited. It's going to have the current, which initially is the start. It's going to have children, which will be the child nodes for the node you are currently on. So when you're on A, the children are B, C, D. Yeah. So I think I should just maybe move this closer a bit so that it's more visible, and drag it. Yeah. So the next is found. So you should not have this already. So this is something I did before. You can. So found simply asks if you have found what you're looking for. So when you get to the node you're looking for, then found will become true. So steps will be the number of steps you're taking, and that's it for your initial state. Now let's write the reducer. Traverse. This function is going to take the initial state as a parameter, and then there will be a switch operation. So we also need an action prop here. So inside of that action there will be a type and a payload. So you want to use the type in your switch call, while the payload will be the data that you will work with. So if the type called is type.next, then we want to update our traverse to reflect all the changes that have happened in our journey. When we move to the next, then we are going to get new values for visited. We're going to get a new value for current. So I'll just copy this guy here. New value for children, new value for found. And then we just increment the steps. Yeah, so now we have the next operation, which we will dispatch from the component later on. So the other thing we need is the reset. So the reset will take everything back to its original state. So I'm going to go to type the reset, and the return will be initial state. Yeah. So this is all for your traverse reducer. So now in the index we're going to combine all our reducers into the root reducer. So in here I'm just going to say import combine reducers, and also I'm going to import traverse reducer. So did I export it? Yeah, I exported it. Okay, so after importing those, then we want to combine inside a root reducer. So if we had more than one reducer, then we would also have those functions in this combine reducers. So inside of combine reducers, you want to say traverse. We'll take traverse reducer. Yeah. And then you want to export the root reducer. And then we move to the store. So the store is the interface that will give us access to our Redux states. So we're going to have to create that. So I'm going to import create store from Redux, and then next I'm going to import reducer from reducer. So here we have our store. Create store with the reducer. And then finally we export default store. So after we have the store, then we move over to our app components. So inside of this component, we need to use a provider to connect the entire app to our Redux store. So in here, we need to import a provider. And also import the store. Redux store. Yeah. So now we simply give the store as a prop to the provider and wrap everything inside of this provider. That way everything inside the provider has access to this store, and the individual components can now be connected directly to the Redux store. So now that we have that connected, we can move up to our components and configure Redux for it, so we can see if we have access to the Redux store. So we'll move up to BFS, and first we get the imports. So an import we need is going to be the connect. We need connect from React Redux. I think this is a lowercase c. And we also need to create a structured selector from reselect, which allows us to select the state that we are working with. So at the bottom here, we're going to say const structured selector is equal to create structure selector, and inside it, so the state we will be working with is a traverse state, so I'll just give it that name, and it will receive the state as a prop, like the entire state as a prop, and we only want the state.traverse. So then we map that to our components using the connect. So the connect takes the structured selector, and then it also takes the BFS components. Here we should have access to traverse. So I can now say maybe just create a paragraph here, and maybe traverse dot steps. Save that. So I'm going to run the app now. Run start. So let's see if we have access to the state in our BFS component. Okay, so now you can see flowchart and 0. So if I inspect this, so I have a React Dev Tools, so you could try to get that so that you have access to this components tab. You can install it and you have access to this tab. I think you have to restart your browser. I'm not so sure. So if I check on BFS here, you can see Traverse and all the props in my Redux store. So that means the Redux is configured properly. So now the next thing we want to do is build our flowchart. So before we do that, I'll just copy my CSS styles into this app.css here. So I'll just grab it from my clipboard and paste it. So it's just some basic styles here. It's just some little stuff, so you could beautify it if you want. And then move to my flowchart. So I think the first thing we need for the flowchart are our structure files, because when you're creating flowcharts with ReactFlow, you need to sort of write out your data in a tree structure. So what we're trying to have as our data is going to work like this. So I'll just get this. So it's going to work like this. Let me find this. Yeah. So this is what we want to plot. We want to plot a tree where A leads to BCD, B leads to JKL, C leads to EF, so exactly like this. And then some nodes lead nowhere, so some nodes are empty. They don't have any children. So we're going to try to create this, which is also this, inside of ReactFlow. So if you check out ReactFlow and you check the examples, so if you check, like this is the feature overview. Okay, so if you look at this one, you have initial elements here. So this is the blueprint that is used to generate this. So for this example here, these 3 nodes here, you have the input node connected to default node and also connected to output node. So that means the input node is the parent and these are the child nodes. So if you look at input here, its ID is 1. This is the label, and this is the X and Y coordinates for the input node. And then you have ID 2, which is the default node, which is this guy. And these are the X and Y coordinates. And then you have the third one, the output, which also has X and Y and label. So if these are the node specifications, so just look at these 3. You can check the page, the overview page. So you just look at these 3, and then you go down to the edges. So the edges specify the connection. The nodes simply specify the position and the features that a node will have, including the CSS styles, everything. But the edges will specify which nodes are connected to which ones and which position they should be in. So in the edges, you see the first one has E1 to 2, that's the ID, and the source here is 1, the target is 2, meaning 1 is going to 2. 2 as the child, 1 as the parent. And then you have a second connection, 1 to 3, source 1 and target 3. So that defines these 3 nodes here. So there are other configurations for these ones, and you can also look at that here. So that's 4, 5, 4, 6, and you can see this one has some custom styling. This one has different styling, and this one gives you the ability to have a drop down in your nodes. So there are lots of parameters to customize ReactFlow, so but what we'll focus on is just the basic small nodes, because that's all we need. So I'm going to create a structure like this where each object is going to be a node, and then I'm going to connect them using some configuration for the edges also. So to start, I go over to my BFS utils, so the chart, yeah. So here I create data.js. So this is where the data will be specified. So I move down to my data file. So I'm just going to copy and paste what I have already done. So basically, first of all, we have the custom styles already. One is the normal style and one is the focus style. So basically, if you look at this, you see when you're on a node, it goes red, and when you're not on the node, it's blue. So the normal style is the blue and the focus style is the red. So we create that first because we'll be attaching it to each of our nodes. And I already wrote up this, so it's a lot of typing. So I just copy and paste it, and you can copy it from the repository that will be linked to this video. So this will generate the edges. Yeah. So this will generate the edges. So what I basically did here is I wrote a function that returns an array of nodes. Sorry, these are the nodes. So this function returns an array of nodes. So the start is 1, which is just the beginning. It's not a node. So 2 is A, which is this one. And then it goes on like that. You have B, you have C, you have D, and it's just it's a bit random, but all the nodes are specified here, so you can go over it and see how it's done. So when you're focused on X, for example, the style is updated accordingly. So whichever one you're focused on gets the focus style, but if you're not focused on it, then it gets the normal style. So this function makes it a bit dynamic. So then we need to also specify the edges. So the edges will determine all the connections we will have. So I'm also going to copy that. You can pull that from the repo also. Yeah. So these are all the connections we have. We have 1 to 2, source 1, target 2, 2 to 3, 2 to 4, 2 to 5, so everything connected. So 1 to 2 is simply start to A, and then 2 to 3 is A to B, 2 to 4 is A to C, 2 to 5 is A to D, and so on, so forth. So after we create this data, then we move into our flowcharts, because currently it's empty, and we want to create our ReactFlow here. So first, we're going to import ReactFlow. So basically, I can just get this from the documentation. This is it here. I can just copy this, and then we'll take out a lot of stuff. This is the first example. There are a lot of things we don't need, so we'll just take them out. So I'll save that first. Yeah, so we set the latest every time the component changes, either the props change or the component gets mounted. So finally, we need the CSS for the flowchart. So without that, the data is not going to appear properly. So this is the default ReactFlow CSS file. So you need to import that, and then you have a clearly, like a beautiful flowchart here. So after you set that up, then the next thing you want to do is send it the focus from the BFS component. So if I move over to BFS now, and I need to feed some values to my flowchart. So before I do that, I need to keep some values in the state. So first of all, okay, we already have the focus, so I'll just say focus is equal to, so we just get the focus from the Redux state, so it will be the current. It will be the current, so that's that. So if you remember, when we did the whole Redux thing in the traverse, the current is, it starts at start. That's the first value. So now we simply pass that value to our flowchart. So with that done, now we now need to update this value every time a change happens. So now we need our BFS function, our generator function, which will help us travel through this tree up here. So in the BFS, we are going to create a generator function, which will be a breadth first search algorithm. So function BFS, so it's going to take the graph, start and the end. So if you're not familiar with generator functions, you can check out the MDN docs for generator functions. So yeah, so it's somewhere here, I believe. Yeah, generator functions. So you can read up these little explanation here and get familiar. So the idea of a generator function is that it allows you to sort of pause and play implementation. So it's not going to run a function till every part of it is exhausted. It's going to run it to a point where you want it to, and it's going to wait for you to ask it to continue before it runs again. So it's going to run at intervals every time you tell it to. So that's the idea behind a generator function. So in this, we're just going to write a normal BFS algorithm. So if you're familiar with it, it's the same thing. The only change will be how we return values. So first of all, we have a queue, because that's what we'll be using for our breadth first search, and it's taking the start, which is the starting point, and then we're going to have an object for visited, so that we can always check if we have visited this node before. So we can simply check with the key if we have visited it. So first of all, we want to add the current position to our visited object. So every time we can check and see if we have already visited where we are. So the current gets added and it's true. So now we're going to say, while there is still something left in the queue, because every time we work on the queue, we're going to kick something out of it. So while the queue is not empty, we want to kick something out of it first. We want to kick something out of it first. And the value of that thing will be checked. So that thing will be a node. That's a node we're currently working on. And then we want to yield. So yield is simply the point where we return values. Where we return values to our parents. So whoever calls the function is going to get all the values we put in this yield. So here I'm going to put everything that I want to send to my state. So like the current, the children. So the children are the next set of items to check. And then visited is everything we have visited so far. And then found, so if we have found what we're looking for, this is where we check. So after yielding, so every time the function is called, it's going to stop here before we play it. So if the node is equal to the final node, we want to just return true. So we just want to stop here. So if we reach the end of the tree, we want to stop here. But if they are neighbors, then we want to get those neighbors by referencing the node inside the graph object. So if we give this A, for example, if we reference graph of A, we're going to get BCD as our neighbors. So the neighbors are what we are also going to check. So we're going to loop through those neighbors and look for what we are looking for inside them. Should be that. So while we're still having children inside the array, then we want to keep going. So if so I think we want to get the value first. We want to get the value of this item first. And then we want to check if we have already visited its neighbors. So if we have, we don't want to check again. So if not visited neighbor, then we want to add it to our visited first. First we want to add it. And then next we want to check. And then next we want to add it to our queue. Because it will be checked later on the next iteration. So at the end we return false. Yeah, so the idea here is that we are checking here, node end, but at first when we run it, we get these values and we update the state with it, and then we ask it to continue, and then it runs all of this. So the point of running all this is that we add the child, or we add the children of the node to the queue, and then we're going to check that queue every time and see if it matches here. So if it matches here, we'll have found returned as true. But if it doesn't match, then we can call this function again and it will continue and run all of this. So if you start with A, then it's going to set A as visited, and then it's going to enter into the queue. That's if it still has children. And then it's going to check if the very next item in the queue is matching, which could be true or false, and then it's going to give you the children of that item as the children, and it's going to give you the updated visited list because the visited will be updated, and the current is where we are right now in the iteration. So after it gives us this, then we are going to call it again. We're going to call next, and it's going to come to check if this node is the last. If it's the last node, then it's going to return true. But if it's not the last node, then it's going to continue and get the neighbors of the current node and then add those neighbors into the queue, so that next time it will check the queue again. So as it goes along, it's going to take A into the queue, it's going to take BCD into the queue, it's going to check all of them, it's going to take JKL into the queue, check all of them. So it's going to go step by step like that until it has exhausted the queue. So I'm going to export this BFS. Yeah. So with this exported, we go to the flowchart and we want to take this generator function and assign it an instance of itself. So basically the way generator functions work is that you sort of assign them. Call this a BFS instance and then set BFS instance. And, so initially it's an empty state, but we're going to assign it an instance of that generator function. So now I'm going to create an initialize function. So this function will initialize a BFS instance. So it's going to do a few things. So inside of it, we have a const new BFS equal to BFS. So it's going to take the graph. The graph is inside of that algorithms file. That's so this is the graph here, and then it's going to take the starting points, which I use A, and then the end point is going to be H. So import this, yeah. So the BFS is going to get invoked with the graph, the A and the H. So after invoking this once, we're never going to use it again. So what we're going to be using is the instance. So if we set new BFS to the instance, then this BFS instance will become this invoked function. So after doing that, we also want to dispatch the reset to reset the state. So to set that up, we need a dispatch here. So const dispatch. So this dispatch will be used to dispatch Redux actions. So if you're familiar with Redux, so what we want to do here is just dispatch reset. If you recall, we have a reset handler in our reducer, so dispatch will handle that. So we need to import the types because we need the types here. So dispatch types dot reset. Okay, and this initialize, we're going to put it at the beginning. So we only want to trigger it once when the component mounts. After that, then we will be clicking buttons to control it. So we give it here and we initialize here. Initialize. Yeah. So I'll just ignore this here for a minute. Quick fix for this line. Yeah. So okay, we didn't import useState. Yeah. So when the component mounts, it initializes a new BFS instance for us. So to use that, oh, we have it in the wrong file. So this shouldn't be here. accident. So just move it into your BFS file. So move it where you are. Yeah. Yeah, so just have it here. It should be here. So we need to do the imports again. Then I need the types again. That's our Redux types. Yeah. So, and use effect also needs to be imported again. Okay. So now we have everything in the BFS. Yeah. So the next thing we need now is our move to next handler. Move to next handler. So this function will move us to the next step in our iteration. So it's going to be really simple. All we have to do is check if we haven't found what we're looking for yet. So if we haven't found what we're looking for, then we want to find it. So we're going to say dispatch type is types.next, and payload. So the payload here would be BFS instance dot next. So the next is going to return an object that contains everything we need. So you're going to say .next.value. So .next will simply return, let me find the .next here. Yeah. So .next will return this object here. The current, the children, the visited, the found. And we're going to take everything to the store. So if you check this traverse store, you see this is what we're taking here. The visited, current, children, found. So it's going to be the payload that it receives. So if you go back to BFS, yeah. So this here is that object. Every time move to next is called, then we trigger the next action and we give it the object as a payload with all the values. So now we need a button to call this, but we also need one more function before we have the button. So we need the reset. The reset doesn't have any payload, it's just a reset. It just takes everything back to the initial state. So now we need two buttons to call the move to next and the reset. So I'll just copy and paste those real quick. Yeah. So now we have a handle click and handle reset. So we can simply replace those with move to next and the reset. So now we have our two buttons. So we can try them, see if they work. Okay, so they work. Okay, so we don't have the message when we find what we're looking for, so we have to update this here. So here I'm going to add a ternary, traverse.found. Yeah. So now when I find H, it should give me the message. Found H in how many steps? And you can reset and it starts again. Oh. No. something's wrong. So I need to check the resets again. Reset. Okay. Yeah. So the reset should call initialize, not stats reset. Yeah. Oh, we can simply then call directly. So we don't need a separate reset function in that case. So let's try again. Yeah. Yeah. So it's perfect now. So I think that's it for this video. If you find it helpful, please like and share. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.